John Street, and you're watching PAX 8 Live.
We want to help you take your MSP business to the next level.
We have just expanded the amount of resources that you as partners have through PAX 8.
Real security is about how you manage the losses, how you take the punches, how well you detect, how well you respond.
This is where we'll be bringing you content that you want to see every week to help you grow your business.
And I think the real winners here are the managed service providers.
Who is this?
I'm Chief Cuteness Officer.
My advice is know what you're selling and know whether it's making you money.
I ended up living in Korea for 4 years.
I was wondering when we were going to talk about the elephant in the room.
But thanks, Dad.
Let's talk about risk assessment. So there's all kinds of ways to respond to risk.
Man, it's great to see you, Dom.
If you're really interested in just the nerdy bits of home security, definitely check out those resources. That was a huge thunder.
Are you guys excited?
Are you ready to start Beyond?
I think folks are really, really excited about what they can do with their customers and how they can help grow their business.
It's a massive opportunity for all of you.
Cheers to the channel community.
What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on PAX 8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. We have an interesting episode today because Microsoft did a very minor product release that threw a complete wrench in our week, but it's super exciting news. We've got a lot to talk about there. We've got a really special surprise for you that I don't want to spoil. Before we get started, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Please interact with us in the comments. We'd love to talk. Don't forget to sign up for PAX 8 Beyond. And let's jump straight into the news. Make fun of myself real quick because I just told everyone, like, hey, interact with us, and I completely forgot to open the chat. So we're doing that right now.
As you're not interactive, at least you're not like opening it and listening to it 6 seconds afterwards like I did for a whole show. So you're doing better than me, Dom. I'm super excited about this guest, actually both guests today, and really both conversations today. One for catharsis, I suppose. I've got a near and dear friend of mine, maybe a commiserator of mine, and someone that's been through similar life experiences that actually gets to talk about a win for him and gets to talk about a win for all of us collectively through that. And then also afterwards, we've got, some brilliance coming on to talk about AI and Copilot, to your point. This minor release that we've seen thousands of people engage in just, 24 to 48 short hours. Yeah. So
right.
Anyways, let's do it. Let's get into the news. Let's bring on our first special guest, Mr. Robert Chaffee. Man.
Hey.
Howdy.
What's happening?
You made it out of the courtroom safely, it seems. So I'm glad to see they let you out. Yeah.
My safety was never in question.
It was the retroactive aspect of it in that statement, I suppose.
Correct.
Oh, man. Well, it's glad to have you here. I'm glad you're back. It looks like you're back in your home office. And the reason we brought you on is we have 2 news articles. I'd like to ask you to join for looking at one of them and get your thoughts on it as a guest member of our news review. And then also, we've got your news article that we're going to bring up and have you kind of go through with us and talk about it and what your intentions were. So thank you for joining us, brother.
Let's rock and roll.
Let's do it. Let's go. We'll go through the first news article. E-crime rapper Punch Made Dev. I never thought I'd say it. Like, I never did. I never thought these words would come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Debuts card shop. What's a card shop? We'll get into that in a minute. The rapper and social media personality Punch Made Dev is perhaps known based on his flashy videos on his songs like Internet Swiping and $1 Million Criminal, earning millions of views. But until recently, there was no support for anything that he actually did stuff himself, that there was bad stuff. But this comes from Krebs, and he says the 24-year-old rapper told reporters he wasn't including people how to conduct wire fraud in this one video he made, but he was just telling them how not to be victims, right? Like, we get into it. But basically, the long and short of the article is he started promoting a new web shop, which is a place stealing, like, selling stolen credit cards, payment identity data, as well as hacked financial accounts from many of the hacks you've heard about over these years, right? And so, short story is, this guy is now apparently actually doing cybercrime, and I thought no better a person to review this particular article than to get the initial thoughts from Mr. Robert Chaffee. So let's hear it, brother. What are your thoughts on this thing, man?
Oh my goodness, is this what rating is this show? Is this G, PG, R?
Oh man, it's whatever Robert Chaffee feels is necessary out of your heart right now, brother. I'll apologize later.
Listen, I don't know, maybe if I heard it wrong or I read it wrong, but if this guy is like, trying to walk a fine line between, oh, I'm not really doing that bullshit, you're either with us or against us. It's a very black and white issue. It cannot be contrasted more than just that. You either are clearly on the wrong side of this issue, or you are absolutely on the right side of this issue. So if you're flirting with some of these gray areas, to me, you've stepped over the line.
Yeah. What color are diamonds? I don't think they're gray, but the diamond-encrusted payment card skimmer that was on his neck, for me, is probably like that much over the top, right? Like,
a little bit.
Just really just a smidge. Yeah. And
I mean, the rap songs are a
Krebs
little out of character too. That's a little weird.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what genre it lands with is kind of the point, right? But what I do love is Krebs reporting on this type of stuff does usually turn into action, right? Through connections, through people being aware of it. And so I think we'll see a follow-up article of this where we get to hear Robert talking about the justice end of it, which brings me directly to what I wanted to spend the next 7-8 minutes talking about with Robert. So Robert, why don't you introduce this article and tell us where it came from, what you think of the author? It might be good, but read this out for me, buddy.
Well, the author deserves monetary payment. No, I'm only kidding. This is a post that I put up this morning. I was at the airport at DFW waiting for my flight back to LaGuardia. It was delayed. It was about 6 a.m. And I was going on very little sleep here, and I just decided to kind of thumb it out. So all these words that you see here were sort of just a recap of yesterday, being in the courtroom for the sentencing of Yaroslav Vasinski, which unfortunately got pushed to March 1st. But I got to read our victim impact statement that I made on behalf of my company, my business partner, our employees, our families, our clients, their respective interests, as well as the entire community, right? And as one might imagine, there's a little bit of maybe some stuff going on behind the scenes about, hey, if you give us some information, maybe we'll be a little bit more lenient on you. And I wasn't there for that because that's under sealed court case. But I did get a chance to speak with the prosecutors and the entire FBI team who's been working on this Kaseya VSA attack case since July of 2021. And they're dedicated, which gives me hope, because if they've got a team of FBI agents and I met all of them, as well as the prosecutors who are working on this case. They were very sensitive to my needs. They have very listening attitude. They were very welcoming of me, and they answered all my questions as best as possible and left the line open for me to continue to communicate with them. So the hope is, because they're focused and dedicated on this case, what the prosecutor told me, and this is the point that I really want to try to make sure everybody has in their head. She said once he is sentenced and now finally put away in the place where he needs to spend the next 115 years, which he likely won't get, but she said their work is not done, right? And she kind of winked at me, sort of, to say, kind of indicate like, hey, there's things I'd love to tell you, but I can't. But just know that this case ain't done. And so read into that inference what you will, but I can tell you my interpretation, which is probably the best because I was the only person sitting in that room in the world other than those people, is that, yeah, there's more work to be done. They're in hot pursuit of some other criminals. And by the way, they have not only recovered all of the ransomware payments of that attack, which was publicly available in the news.
Yeah.
But what's less reported and only in court documents is that they've recovered many millions of dollars more of other illegally obtained assets that are associated with this cohort.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope that they're making progress here. So score one for the United States.
Let's set the stage for what people don't know. If they don't know this history, you referenced July 4th of, I'm assuming, 2021, right?
2021.
Robert? Is that correct?
Well, July 2nd was the day of the attack, but July, Independence.
This is the
2021.
Yeah,
Kaseya VSA
July
attack.
4, Kaseya VSA attack, right? And so for people that aren't aware of this, Robert got the, I wouldn't say opportunity, but I would say the charge and the mission to go speak on behalf of the victims and so many people in your cohort of that. And if you remember back to that, that was one of the early supply chain attacks that we all talk about, where a compromise of a known vulnerability in this system took X many months to solve, right, from April or so when it was reported by DIVD until it was actually executed upon by the threat actors sometime in July, on that July 2nd weekend. Right, those are all the victims. They're victims that are our friends. They're the people that we know and love, right? And those clients and constituents they serve. And so, Robert, you got to go and speak and in that kind of victims impact statement for this situation. And I wanted to touch on a couple things you said. One of them being that the Department of Justice has gotten really, really good at extracting and seizing funds on open exchanges in Bitcoin exchanges, right? They've gotten really good at that. And to your point, Robert, that's probably the extensibility they're talking about in those millions, is saying not only did we seize this Bitcoin wallet address, but we also know that this was probably a payment tumbler, and all of these payments that are being tumbled in this are also illicit and should also be part of that seizure. And I'm assuming that's that extensibility that we're seeing there.
Yes.
The other piece being the prosecution of this leads towards precedent. Precedent leads towards, if we can get hands on people, we can continue said precedent. And I think to your point, there's probably going to be more. And unlike my case, which was quite private by an organization, yours was part of everything smothered all over the news for everybody. And so It was a very easy path to charge the horse on and to be an Ukrainian national and for us to put hands on. I mean, this has been your journey. Do you feel any sense, Robert, of like relief or catharsis or validation, or maybe I just don't have a word? Maybe I'm leaning into my own PTSD and maybe I'm going to cry on my own here, but I want it for me, not for you.
Well, I don't really know how to properly answer that question, Matt, because I thought I would find some closure. I thought I would be able to release the emotion that continues to collapse my composure at times, and I don't think PTSD is necessary. First of all, I mean, that's a self-diagnosis. I don't actually have a diagnosis for that, but I have to imagine I am experiencing
the same category. So,
and I don't know. I don't think it goes away so easily. And if evidence of what happened after that, meaning that afternoon, last night, and all of my travels today, the tears that were welling up in my eyes at random points, as if it's any evidence that there is no closure here for me, then there you go. That's it. I don't know if it's pride. I don't know if it's repressed feelings. I don't know if it's the outpouring of love that I got on social media and privately. I don't know what it is, but I'm still feeling a lot of emotion, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, Matt. Even if this punk serves, 10, 15 years. My hope is that I was looking to do a plus X to whatever his sentence would have been. I was told by people who were in the room, meaning the prosecutor, the FBI agents, as well as my brother and some other friends that showed up, that in my brother's words, he said the judge was on the edge of her seat. She was not breathing. She was not blinking. She was completely enraptured in your 20-minute victim impact statement. I mean, I was pounding the podium, and I was choked up. I was crying. I was ferocious. I was everything in between. But I needed to deliver a message to not just him, not just that court, not just the judge, but the world.
That's it. I couldn't say it any better, brother.
Robert,
man. I get the benefit of working with you on a very constant basis to try to fight this scourge and try to drive this change. And appreciate it. thanks for being there for all of us. So we're gonna move on from the
Thank
news.
you so
and,
much for coming on.
I'm gonna gain
such
some
short
composure,
notice.
and
that's huge.
Appreciate you.
Okay. Love you all.
Robin,
see you, Robert.
Get us some brilliant words in here.
You know, a lot of people think that when you are conducting a lot of your business through cloud services, that actually removes all risk. What I'm going to tell you is it removes some risk and then it adds new risk. And one of the things we really have to think about is who we're outsourcing pieces of our business to. I had the experience of getting an email where they used a third-party service because they were going through bankruptcy, and that service got hacked. So when you outsource something, you're still accountable to your partners, to your employees for what happens in those third-party tools, which is why we do vendor risk assessment. And one of the things that people don't think about are financial related risk. How financially viable is the company that you're using? Because in this instance, the company went bankrupt. So now people's money is not available anymore. The big guys are going to get the money and the little people at my level have to take a loss, right? So when you outsource something, how financially viable is that company? Because if you've outsourced a major component of your business, a critical component, that's when you really need to know, are they security conscious? Do they meet the security standards? Do they meet our financial standards? Do they have global issues? Now when you outsource something, you know, there are anti-modern slavery laws. If you outsource something to some company and they're doing something that's going to violate those regulations, guess what? That comes back to you. So when we start plugging in a lot of SaaS services and tools, what we've done is we've expanded, in a way, we've expanded the threat landscape. And in some instances, there may be some benefits that we don't have everything internal, but there are also going to be the additional risk that now you're trusting a third party, and how trustworthy is that third party? So that is why when we look at third parties, if it's something critical, if it's something that has to do with privacy, we want to see their SOC report. We want to see their ISO 27001 certificate. We want to see their SOC 1. We want to know, have they taken security and privacy serious? Because when we outsource something, we still retain the risk. So think about that, and also think about what pieces of your company can you not afford to place with a lower level player. There are things that you can outsource to a smaller company that won't be critical if something goes wrong. But there are things that you should never outsource to a small fish. We love helping smaller companies, and we want to invest in making the environment more diverse and competition more fair, but there are some things you do not want to outsource to a smaller company that's not stable, both security-wise and financial-wise.
All right. Well,
that was a
back.
powerful segment, man. That was crazy.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's Robert has lived through this, and he's passionately spoken about it on stage, and he's just a great all-around human. He dedicates his time. He's on the ERT. He's the chair of the ERT with me. I'm co-chair. He's just a great human, and he does it well, and I think it helps to hear it. But all right, moving forward, though, one of the things that we can do is focus forward instead of backwards on these challenges, and we're looking at the precipice of probably one of the largest challenges in our modern time around how rapid something's exploding, how valuable it is going to be to the world, and how much risk it creates as a result of that. And so I would like to bring on, because Nathan Taylor kind of brought this up,
And so I'd like to bring on Nathan Taylor to join in a conversation with us today. Nathan's from SourcePass and another personal friend of both you and myself, right, Dom? So, Nathan, welcome to the party, buddy. Introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know you. You've been on
Thanks for having
before.
me. Yeah, I've been on a couple times. I think I was on the unaired beta episode, so
The
see
very
that
first one.
someday.
Yeah.
You are the
Yeah,
OG of OGs in that regard. Yeah.
That was fun. Thanks for having me. I lead our sales engineering team and at SourcePass, and I help kind of drive a lot of our Microsoft practice. And this obviously is right over the middle of the plate for Microsoft disrupting the world for us. So it's exciting to be chatting about this.
Yeah. And just what is this, right? We are talking about the exposure of Copilot now down to the SMB, right? Because before you had this barrier that, in my opinion, kind of placed a little bit of expectation of maturation in the mix, right? You go to mid-market, 100 user commitment, you're probably at least dealing with some of these topics. And what you brought up, Nathan, and the statement that really stands out to me was, man, MSPs aren't doing this. What was that, Nathan? What was our initial conversation? Like, help me understand the problem here.
Yeah, I think Copilot's this incredible opportunity, like you said. It's a seminal moment, like Windows 95 or Office 365, that we're going to look back on as a moment when our industry changed, and it's exciting. It's fun to play with, and it's an accelerator. It accelerates how quickly you can take notes or how quickly you can, understand a large document or write a document. I mean, it's an incredible tool, but it also accelerates your access to things. So as this product launches, it honors all of Microsoft's guardrails around data in their ecosystem. If you don't have access to it, Copilot's not going to violate that. But a lot of small businesses have data they don't know about. They got file shares that are 20, 30, 40 years old that have kind of just built up over time. And in some folder somewhere, the entire company has access to a spreadsheet with salaries that nobody knew about, that nobody realized was there. And unless somebody was digging for it, they weren't going to find it. But Copilot will go through and thoroughly, index that and answer any question anybody asks about it that has access to that folder. And, I think there's just some accidental insider threats are going to become the theme of this year as people turn this product on and roll it out in the SMB. We're around MSPs all the time, and we all know that data governance is something that's hard to do, on the small scale for hundreds of customers. It's just not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, because it requires humans, right? Think of some of the problems that can be created. Yeah. Dom shares super secret file, only Matt and Dom, and it's not necessarily encrypted. It's not necessarily protected from sharing. It might just be something where he's given me a link to it, and now I go and save that file and share it somewhere else, or I save it so it's convenient for me, or I pull it out of the Teams chat you sent it to me in and save it in my documents, and now somebody, right? And you have that, and then you also have the aspect of the default link, right? The everyone share that I send you one link for has theoretically granted access to everyone. And so you get into this understanding of what used to take some nosy person digging into data can happen accidentally through a weird question that gets interpreted, right? You have some challenges that exist there that you just don't even think about, and it relies on the humans to do the right thing, or the admins and the systems to make it so it is hard for them to do the wrong thing, right? Like it's a combination of those two, and it's not done well. I didn't have it solved. Dom, what are your thoughts on it? Did you have this
not
one
at
solved?
all. I mean, I think if you talk to most SMBs about data governance, they're not even going to know the concept. They're not going to have any understanding of that. I used to argue with customers about why they collect certain pieces of PII and why it was essential to what they do. And most of the time it wasn't. It was like, you don't
Personally
need Social
identifiable
Security numbers
information
to deliver that. Oh, my bad. You stole my acronym.
Just want to get my ding.
I
did.
Thank you. Just the data we have. Why do we even have that data, let alone what is it, where is it, who needs access to what? And even it's hard to have like an RBAC or role-based access control conversation with them because there aren't any roles. It's like it's Tim, Dave, Bob, and Jill, and they do all the things, right?
Yeah.
I think I used all fictitious names there. Pulled that one off.
Yeah. I don't know any Jills. Yeah, we're good. Nathan, one of the things that you talked about, though, is going to market with this, right? That's one of the things we really want to focus on. Yeah. And it is this thing we joked about in the beginning of the show, which is, you've got a CEO saying, don't do this. and you've got a chief legal officer or a CISO saying, or a CEO saying, we got to go to market with this, and you've got a chief legal officer or someone in that space going, not yet, we got to figure this out. How do you deal with that just exposition of we have to do both well? How are we going to move forward? Yeah.
Yeah, because as we've talked about, solving data governance is not there's no quick Band-Aid to put on that, right? You've got, 7 terabytes of data in SharePoint. You can't quickly go find all the sensitive data. Like, you can't just fix that overnight. So, there is some liability from, just rolling this out to a company, and you don't know what's going to happen. You're rolling the dice, and you can't put that genie back in the bottle, right? It's out there. And as we were even talking, what if you index something for somebody and then eventually you go through and clean it up? How long does that index exist? How long can they still reference?
How long is that fruit
data?
From a poison tree? Right. Exactly.
We don't know. So we got customers who are like, "Hey, Microsoft said this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. This is amazing. Go do it."
And it is pretty damn cool. And they're not
fun.
wrong. It is pretty life-changing in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so you get the energy, but then on the same side, we have to be responsible and make sure that we are, not doing something that everybody regrets down the road. And so we have to find that shorter path to start to solve some of these challenges.
And I think we have some guide here, right, Nathan? And that's what I wanted us to spend the rest of the show talking about, because in my point, and what I'm afraid of is once I give one user a license and it indexes poison data, I don't know what the return time and getting back to whole is. I don't know if it's a cadence of a next sync or if it's always there. I don't know those things. And so for me, as a security professional, I would be very hesitant to start exposing that until I was ready to have a plan forward of what data asset. And so what I believe this does, and MSPs out there, like, throw in the comments, Matt, you're an idiot, or I think you're stupid, or I agree with you. But basically, I think this is going to drive a lot of project revenue. I think this is going to drive a lot of professional services to sit down with MSP vendors or with clients and partners and say, let's start getting data governance. And it's so apparent. And what I wanted to bring is something you brought up, Nathan, is how you and your team have been looking at this a little bit, which is the Microsoft assessment for readiness. And what I'd love to do is have 3 security professionals go through these questions and talk about all the things we've got solved in the world so we can wrap this up on a Friday and call it done, right? Or pick holes in it, one of the two. So why don't we go into that, and we'll dig into the Microsoft assessment, which is super awesome. I'm going to share my screen real quick.
It is awesome.
So hopefully I don't make any mistakes here. I'll try to keep it OPSEC for my boy Dom. Let's go ahead and change. Sorry, y'all. We're doing it live. Okay, the production people back there are like grimacing, but I got this, y'all, I promise. Okay, so let's look at this. It starts out, this is the Microsoft worksheet. There's some instructions. There's other tabs for different next steps and for Copilot baselines and what you need to have in place. But I want to focus on this. So it starts with user information, like how many people, what kind of licenses. Sure, we've got that part. We understand its validity. And then there's this organizational profile, like, hey, why do you want AI? Have you targeted any use cases? These are all very business conversations that lead us where we want to go, but are still valuable, right? But what got to me is when we start stepping into this one on 16, and we get into their security aspect of this. And this first question, let's just tackle this first question together, y'all. And it is, which person in your organization should be our single point of contact for decisions related to a data security and governance? So, Nathan, just kick it off. That's the first question you're going to ask your customer.
Damn.
Yeah, this is great because I think this is something that we haven't traditionally done in the MSP space. The way we work, we got our guy we talk to, and we got our primary contact, and they make the decisions, and then they socialize things internally with their the rest of their company when they need to answer questions. But this idea of asking our customers to designate somebody as owning these things is something we need to embrace as we get into frameworks.
Yeah.
If you get into CMMC, the first thing you're doing is you're defining who all these different roles are, who the stakeholders are in the company that are taking
100%.
ownership of this. And this is a great opportunity. I think this whole Copilot thing, we talked about it, it's going to drive maturity across cybersecurity for a lot of customers if we allow it to. If we embrace it, it's going to drive us to be more mature. And this is one of those examples. There should be somebody at the client who says, yeah, I'm responsible for knowing what our policies are around privacy, what our data is, what's the sensitive data, where it is, making sure that we're thinking that through, talking that through, and owning that. Because as the third party, that can be hard for us to own because we don't always know all the variables or what's changing. And that partnership of them having somebody who's agreed to own this is a great first step, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I agree. Dom, what are your thoughts on this? Like having a data owner, an information security officer designated.
You know, a
inside
lot
the
of
client
times,
base?
you know, in a larger company, you call this your DPO, your data protection officer, right? And that role doesn't exist anywhere outside of the big, right? Like, so even broaching that question to the customer, the amount of context you have to put on that is massive. Because again, you're introducing a foreign concept of data governance. So you're right, Nathan. I think this will drive a lot of that, but I also think it's a really hard road of how many of your customers, you know, for any MSPs, have you guys had this conversation with of, hey, look, we need to look at everything you're collecting and why and for how long and all these different aspects that go into data management so that you don't find yourself in one of these situations, right? And we make the joke around the office at PAX 8 of like, oh, let's ask him what John Street's salary is, but that's a real concern. Or like in a medical office, what if there's a bunch of patient files in the wrong spot and you're suddenly asking about medical conditions? So there's a lot of potential impact here. And Henry Tim put in the chat, good to see you, Henry, by the way. You know, a lot of client education needs to happen first on understanding the true risks that AI poses, and data classification and sanitization prior to inputs. I think that's all really valid, right? We need to understand what we have, purge what we don't need, and implement some level of access control to ensure that the right people have the right things at the right time.
100%. All right, 17. We got a few more to get through, so it's going to be a fun one. 17. Do you have, Nathan, this is you being my client now, and I'm asking you this question. Do you have a written policy that documents the requirements, comma, space, use cases, and I will say comma, space out loud, it's like an onomatopoeia in some way, use cases and procedures with regards to data security, comma, space, data sharing, and management? This is not a requirement, but if available, it really helps a partner understand key requirements and directives. Like, let's just talk about that last statement maybe another time. But the first question is, like, how many of your partners, Nathan, have a written policy that documents requirements in case of data security and data sharing?
It's a great question, and it's an area where we're really pushing. We have a team that helps write that, and it's something we're really pushing customers to do. But you also understand from your perspective that this is not just an easy button process, right? To get a customer on policy and procedure, again, we need to have 6 months worth of conversations about what do you have, what do you need. We've got some boilerplate topics and some boilerplate policies, but then we have to work together and collaborate with them to make sure it fits their business, and then you got to get those disseminated to customers. So it's a great opportunity to it's a thing we have to work together to get there on this, and it's another policy and procedure we need to put time into.
And the challenge is this. Here's why I'm making this, and I'm being a little hyperbolous, but here's the challenge, right? The challenge is, if you think about Dom's example of leaving a file with medical data on the desk, it would be as if someone, every time you did that, magically had the ability to read it instantly and never forget it. Right? And I think that's the piece of it, right? Is it's not just that we have this so inaction and failure is instantly inaction and failure. And I'm not hoping to dissuade anyone from using these amazing tools. I'm hoping people understand the risk and why data governance is Control 3 in CIS. It is a reason that we have this very early on, and it's the biggest gap in cybersecurity for you at the SMB, and shocker for any of my enterprise players out there, it's the same problem. So I think this is the next takeaway, is not only do you have to have a written policy, but the people are actually doing it, and it governs the way they're sharing, and it governs the way they're handling data, because if they don't, it will be found by automation and by the AI.
You need to remember too
and learning.
That a lot of that, if you're the MSP, the majority of all that work we just described is not your job, nor is it your decision to make. Obviously you need to counsel and consult.
You've got to educate and empower. Yeah.
Right. But you can't make these decisions for them. They need to come to their own conclusions about how do we manage data, what data do we collect, and what does that policy look like. And again, they don't know. So you kind of have to guide them down this road of, here's, like you said, Nathan, you have boilers. Get them started and make them make hard decisions.
Right.
I do find a direct irony. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Nathan.
I was going to say, the other piece of this is there's a ton of upside here. Right?
Yes.
This is an opportunity for us to drive this. We were talking
Absolutely.
the other day that ransomware is yesterday's news. The new threat is data exfiltration. So this timing of being able to start talking to our smaller customers and say, let's clean up your data. Let's put some rights around it. Let's tighten it up. Let's get rid of old data. Let's figure out what you have. Make sure people know what they're supposed to do. Start reviewing this regularly. It's going to pay dividends if you ever have a user who gets their account compromised, and all of a sudden they don't have access to sensitive data. And that threat actor has a lot less access than they would have a year ago in Copilot, and our readiness
100%.
for it is going to drive a big win across our customers.
Yeah, 100%, Nathan. Like, that's absolutely it. I will say,
not to apply another edge.
Got 10
let's
more.
say everyone, I know, but let's say everyone is super trustworthy at the company, but your Copilot user gets compromised. So now I'm the threat actor. I just go ask Copilot what I want, right? And it pulls it up.
Right.
Here's the link. You can download it right now. You just where do you want it?
Please find all information about all my customers and post that,
threat
especially
actor
things that are very,
concierge.
that have a high sentiment of negative, right?
Right.
No,
Amazing.
it's awesome. So I do find that the next question is really also going to drive what you were talking about, Nathan, of this higher adoption, better interactions with customers around security, which is, do you use the cybersecurity framework as their foundation? Like, are you making this up as you go, or are you following something else, right? And it really is important there to say, like, where does your practitioner anchor lie? Is it still in the arrogant doctor that says, I can do everything, I know everything? Or is it in the understanding of specialists and the understanding of what we're doing in that space? And to your point, even, what's on their side of the shared responsibility matrix? What's on my side of the shared responsibility matrix? Like, this is what these work for. What I do love is it's number 18. And I believe in the CIS 18. Like, this has to be a thing, right? This can't be an accident or just serendipitous.
It's amazing.
I digress. Okay, so we all know what that part is. You can listen to any of other shows. We don't have to beat that to death. Does your organization have any requirements relating to data residency or data processing? Right? Like, are you already aware even of your data flows, right? And some of the answers are, my organization has no known requirements. My organization requires all data within my tenant region. My organization requires all data like, we're not at that level of sophistication, but it should bring up good talking points, right, Nathan? Or Dom, anybody have anything to add to this one?
It's a critical thing for customers to know, right? It's one of those things where they need to be thinking about that, right? Of, and I think it helps kind of them go, well, why would I? Well, let's talk about, do you have any
data sovereignty?
Do you have any credit card data? What does that move you into? You think you're a construction company, but you got a bunch of credit card numbers, so you are actually under PCI compliance, and that changes your rules. And you thought you didn't have any rules, but you're accidentally under a framework, right? So that's it's a great conversation.
Accidentally under a framework. That needs to go on a teach.
That's a hot take right there. Accidentally under a framework. I want some socks for that. That's good. All right, what is the default level of Microsoft 365 document sharing in your organization? This is important, right? Because people with existing access, that's at least limited to what was shared by some discretionary means. Specific people is at least targeted, and it's Dom has this access and it's manageable. Only people in my organization, or just about anybody. And when you think about the B answer to this, only in my organization, it's still really broad and can cause a lot of unintended consequences with data, can't it?
Absolutely. It's one of those default settings, or one of those settings that you set it once and you forget it, that we got to start reviewing with our customers, is what are the sharing permissions in SharePoint and why are they set that way? And
that's the point. It's their choice.
I'm guilty of only using option B. Like, if I want to share a OneDrive file with you and I don't feel like typing, I might just, anyone in the company, but only Matt's going to get the link, so it's fine. Like, it's a really long link.
Is it though?
What is the layer of exposure there, right? That kind of thing on you, but man, it could go wrong.
Taking him out with Teacup. Teacup's getting Dom. It's okay. We're back though. We're back. Jeez. But you're right. Like, what is that exposure? Does it have this presence and understanding of what's there because it's been shared, not necessarily just because I have been sent the link, right? Is it because of the creation of access that it has access? And some of those are unanswered questions for us. But the point being, to your point, Nathan, this is a choice of a data owner, right? This choice is a choice that we shouldn't be making for them. This is their choice of how they intend to do business. How are they setting their own requirements, right? At Iconic, we didn't let you share with anyone unless you were a named entity that we allowed. We didn't allow guest access. We didn't allow that. You and I have had those relationships, right? We've talked about that, and even as we interacted with PAX 8 and when we were both in practitioner days, right? So I think this is a big one to talk about with your clients. 21, Has your
I'm going to
organization
jump in with the
implemented a
audience
permission?
question real
Yep.
quick before we do questions.
Let's
So
do it.
MSP Madman wants to know, how much pressure do MSPs feel right now to adopt or die? It's a great question.
Oh man, that is definitely going on.
High
There's
question.
a lot of pressure. Oh yeah, I mean it. You know, we had some very direct requests from customers that said, we're not too concerned about your concerns about liability here or what could happen. It's our data, it's our company. Let us add it. You know, that's a response we're going to feel, and I think the desire to be ahead of the curve and be an innovator on this is going to be real. People are really going to struggle with it.
Yeah. All right,
Fair
Matt,
enough.
number 21. It's a good question.
Okay.
Had to ask him.
So I love it, and it does get into some really interesting things that I think MSPs are looking across a chasm that they have to guide their customers over, and they either choose to turn around and go back and just not do this business, or they find a way across it, and that's where we seem to be at.
And some of your customers are going to fall right into it. Like we need to be ready.
They will, face first, laughing like, Wile E. Coyote style. Okay, so has your organization implemented a permission model to control access to their data? And what we're talking about here is like access controls, right? And they're asking things like, we have a defined method. No, everybody can just self-service. They get access to what they want. We conduct manual permissions, but really, we're talking, do you have RBAC or ABAC or DAC or MAC or Bella Padula or name them, right?
You got a lot of acronyms to go back into.
Oh, right. Attribute-based access control, role-based access control, mandatory access control, discretionary access control, and Bella Padula is just Bella.
That's not. That was 4 acronyms then.
Okay, it's fair. I should get 4 dings on this one, but it's okay. All right, yeah. So how many of you can say that there's any type of standardization of permission control models? And even in reality, can you ever have just one? So really, Nathan, this is the question. As an MSP, what does this look like for a client? Where does it sit? Does it fall under current models, or is it something that we have to create in that kind of co-managed model we're talking about?
Well, and I think this question's harder than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you had a file share, and you could say, hey, we have a standard for how data goes in that file share, and this is the accounting folder, and the only accounting department has access. But every single team site has a SharePoint behind it. And so you give somebody the ability to build their own team site for their department, and they decide to invite somebody from another department in. They've now set permissions on a team site, and the role-based access is whoever owns the team site sets the access. And so,
which is discretionary access, actually.
Yes.
But that's okay.
And so then we get back to how often do we review those, or what are the standards around there? What are the rules around that?
Yeah.
And I think that's why you got to have a layered approach, as we always do in cybersecurity, which is let's work to dial in our role-based access and make sure the right data is in the right spot with the right permissions.
Yep.
And I think this is where the sensitivity labels become really valuable. If it is sensitive, let's label it. If it's in the wrong spot or the wrong person has access, the sensitivity labels are another layer of rights management that says, yeah, you can see this file, but you can't open it. That sort of thing. That's why those layers are there, and it's a big opportunity to drive some, improvement in that area.
Which is a slam dunk into 22. Right? 22 says, does your organization protect sensitive information in the organization at the individual document level? No, I tend to like to look for sensitive data at the macro level and hope it's not in there. But what they're getting at is, do you set them in its own place? Does PII, or personally identifiable information, go to a bucket called PII stuff? And that's where it's stored, and that's kind of what they're getting at.
Yes.
So let's talk about this one a bit. Dom, what are your thoughts on this sensitive information at an individual document level question?
Well, it's right there in the answer with information protection, right? And it's first of all, again, understanding what your data is, right? Like, what data do I actually have? But it's really about classifying it, right? And saying this is PII, or this is PHI, or protected health information, or this is, financial data or trade secrets, or whatever the case may be, right? And if you can classify it with a product like information protection, then you start to be able to encrypt it and control. Even if I put it in the wrong spot, the wrong people still can't access it, right? And that's really powerful. We have a really simple system here at PAX 8 for that, using information protection, but there's a number of ways to go about it.
Yeah, 100%. Nathan, anything to add, or we want to move on to 23?
Yeah, I think it it triggers into the Microsoft stack of resources, though. If you got to be on Business Premium to take advantage of a lot of these features on the small business side, and if you do, you've got access to information protection and labeling and all those things.
Labels and
but we also have the challenge of we want to protect all those files, but they're spread across a SharePoint site, and sometimes with the business licenses, it's hard to find the tooling to go find that data. It's not as intuitive as it would be in an enterprise space, and so those are some of the challenges that we're all going to have to collaborate to find the right third-party tools to allow us to leverage that sensitivity label functionality. The rights management across the entire file share with 7 terabytes of data. There's a real technical challenge that we're all going to have to collaborate to solve.
Yeah, and there's a lot of vendors working on it. Microsoft in their own way of how do we bring this type of capability from Purview at an E5 level to bring that to a business premium level. How do we bring these type of things and capabilities down to that end consumer? And just a lot of unsolved challenges today. But the question is, like, in some way, form, or fashion, what they're really getting to is, do you have the ability to classify data, and do you have the ability to protect what's sensitive? And if you think about it, this is actually asking, do you even do 3.7? Right? Do you even 3.7, bro? Or 3.1 and 3.2, bro? Because when you think about CIS, 3.1 says have a data management and data governance process, essentially. 3.2 says have a freaking inventory of what you need to have. And only in 3.7 do we start getting into this understanding of having a data classification system. Right? And saying, can you classify? Well, that's an IG2, right? That's an implementation group 2 safeguard. Most MSPs have been taking their clients to IG1, as they should, from a sense of risk level. What we've seen happen is a drift in risk because of new capabilities. Now that document that Dom left for 5 minutes when he went to the bathroom is read in its hyperbolous exemplary way, right? And so that's the challenge with this. So beat this to death. But 23, does your organization have a process to regularly audit and act on stale or inactive data? Like, do you have the ability to take and apply stale data, which comes into data retention timeframes, comes into setting, like most data governance hasn't been established to say, guess what, after 7 years we delete this data, or after a project goes dead we move it to archive, or right, that kind of aspect of it. But what are your thoughts on this? How do you solve this? And is it in place?
I think small business keeps all data forever. The number of small businesses that have done any sort of data cleanup ever is got to be a very small percentage. And data retention, I think retention policies are generally driven by risk people, lawyers, legal counsel, compliance people, right? Well, small businesses don't have people speaking into their data governance from those chairs. And so we don't think that way. And I think it's a great opportunity to start to drive those conversations. Like you said, hey, do you really need any files over 7 years? And if you do, what are they? Let's go put those somewhere special, put a different retention policy on them. But let's start, talking about, can we start deleting old data? Can we, or even just removing access? Is there a layer of, we've got an archive policy, it's stuck somewhere where users can't get to it. It'll do wonders for those of us doing data migrations in the future if we can get some of this built.
Brother, sorry, you just triggered me there, right? You're like, you really mean there's 2 petabytes of crap that you're never going to look at again, and I need to move this with a SharePoint migration tool.
Coupons.
Thanks. So many Chili's coupons. Yeah, 100%. I want to bring up a real quick comment from Henry Tim, and I love it to death because he's not wrong. I do always try to equate things back to the basics, right? Can we pull that up real quick? All right. That's on me. I called it out of the blue. I called an audible. We're good. We'll pull up Henry Tim's comment here in a second. Let's go on. So 24. So we've talked about this data and data retention. And actually, I will beat this to death a little bit more on 23. I had a company that laid giant pipes under city streets in major cities. That was their whole company's job. That's what they did for water mains, right? And they had a water main they put in the late 70s or early 80s or something. And it was during the time of computers. And they got sued by the city when it ruptured. And they're like, hey, we're going to need discovery on data about this initial contract in 97, which says we don't have all the data we need. We'd like your copies of it. And he was actually wrong. He should have lost that lawsuit. But you know what he did? He won that lawsuit. Why? His company had a data retention policy that said we delete data after 10 years. That was back in the file days. That applied to the way they applied their file structure. And when they were asked for legal discovery, they were able to say, my data retention policy is 10 years. I do not have that data any longer for that contract.
Right.
They'll save you too. So there's both sides of that sword, right, in that regard.
Yes.
It's always the scream test, too. Move it to that inaccessible archive. If you only screams for 3 months, it's safe to delete.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay. This one right here.
Right.
This one right here has got to be something we're all doing, right? There's nobody here that's not using AIP and labeling, so we're good. Does your organization protect and encrypt? That's what they're saying when they say protect. And data stored in Microsoft 365 at the content level using IRM, ARM, rights management methodologies, right? So, and what's interesting is they get into it at even deeper, saying, yes, but we leverage and bring our own key. Now, I think you could imagine what that would do if that was the answer, because now I could stop Copilot from reading the material data unless I've given the key for that potentially, right? And so that depending on the infrastructure. But it is interesting they asked that question. What are your thoughts on this one, even in just the basic question of do you encrypt, let alone do you bring your own key to the party?
Yeah, I would guess that most SMBs, they've encrypted a couple key files with like, Excel file encryption, because they've got some super secret file they don't want coworkers getting into, and there's a little bit of that going around. And then probably rights management is enabled on email. If I want to send an encrypted email, that's enabled on some large percentage of customers. But the number that are encrypting files that are just sitting in an internal SharePoint folder has got to be very low. It's not a thing that people think about, and it's a great opportunity for us to leverage that and kind of start to build that action flow. I can't imagine any SMBs that have bring your own key unless they're in some highly regulated org, like they've got some reason they're doing it, or some person who's really obsessed about it that did the bring your own key thing, because it's not easy to do that. That takes a lot of effort.
Here's why this matters, Nathan. I want to bring this back to what I think was a slight misstatement by you. And maybe I'd offer this correction of saying that the ransomware is the past. No, encryption as a form of ransomware is the past. However, data exfiltration as a ransomware methodology is the future. And I think that's the statement that really makes 24 such a big thing. And it really makes a lot of your 3.12 and 3.10 and 3.11 and CIS around and data encryption aspects of this, of saying, like, if I encrypt it and someone steals it, they can't display it somewhere. They can't use it somewhere unless they're cracking AIP, which, I mean, tongue-in-cheek, that was totally a technique, if you remember, Dom, from the randomness of AIP. But, anyway, side topic. But that said, you start getting to a point where you're now living with this understanding of being compromised. I'm living saying that, yes, these documents are encrypted, and to me that's seamless. But if you take that document somewhere else, it's not useful to them. If they exfil this data and they're not me any longer, they don't have my token, they can't read it. And if they haven't exported it in some other fashion and I have controls on that, then they can't do anything with it. So 24 is critical for a thought of we should be baseline encrypting things in certain places based on sensitivity at all times to protect the same way we do a laptop. Right? Is anybody familiar with the term cryptographic shredding? Dom and Nathan and both of you, I know Dom is. Right? Cryptographic shredding is saying I have a key, I destroy said key, it is unlikely someone cracks said key, that is destroyed even though I no longer maintain possession of it. And we already accept that generally, right? Laptops with BitLocker on them, stolen, are generally accepted not as a breach, right? That's the way this thinks. Think that the same way with your files, right? If they're also done at that content level, you're creating that same scenario around breach v. breach when it comes to that attorney conversation, right? And so anyways, just
back to the physical example, like I leave the paper on my desk on accident, but you can't read it.
And now it's
like
encoded
it's there,
or encrypted.
but you can't read it, right?
Right.
Exactly.
This is zero trust at the file level, which is awesome, right? Let's take zero trust to the nth degree. There's a ton of value here,
And a lot would argue encryption should have been a component of file access even in the very beginning, right? If you were redesigning this knowing what we know now, my permission would have been ingrained in my encryption, right? It would have been in that methodology of accessing the file, right? And that's not the way it is today. So we're backfilling that in a way. So 25, we only got 3 more to go through, and that's good because we have 9 more minutes and we talk for a lot about things. So we do have a couple comments I'll address. I'll just read Henry's comment real quick. Henry said, we should have a timer on all Matt Lee calls going how long it takes him to relate a topic back to CIS safeguards. It ain't long. I imagine that mean time to exhibition is really low.
Yeah.
In that regard.
A little over under.
And then Azure for MSPs, I slid the toggle on the floppy disk. Is that encryption? Touche. I love it, Neon Cobra. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's encryption. That's Missouri encryption.
For sure.
Sorry for my Missourians.
Missouri encryption.
Okay, and then the last one says by HueyNet, SMBs are not going to stop doing their daily profit-making work to clean up their data. How do MSPs help SMBs effectively and efficiently who want to use Copilot now? That's a slam dunk question, right? Nathan, let's do it, or Dom, whoever's first.
Oh man, I love Mike Hughes putting one right over the middle of the plate for us here. So thanks, man. Good shout out.
Right, I mean, just in the sweet spot.
I mean, this is the discussion. This is the discussion of the day, right? How do we do this? This is, I think it's about building, starting a conversation. These readiness assessments are great, and I think they're a great place to start to really just say, hey, let's talk about where you're at. Let's get a score out of this, and let's talk about it. And then you identify individual layers of improvement, right? And I've been using the term in some of the conversations I have. There's a readiness assessment and there's a readiness remediation for Copilot. The second phase.
100%.
We've done our assessment. Let's go identify some low-hanging fruit that we can do quickly, and then let's identify some long-term efforts to really, grow and improve our approach on data.
I have another take to this too that I'd like to proffer, right? Because some of this is big boy, big girl shorts and pants on here. And I think some of this talk needs to be, we can go through this readiness assessment and we can find that you are not ready and that you are going to have challenges. And I'm going to educate you on all of those risks of you turning this on. But at some point, they're going to turn it on. I'm actually okay with that. If I've done the due care to educate them, to make sure they understood what they were doing, and I documented that, and even better if there's some money that changed hands for me to do so, and they're going down that path, and they still know that they have this defined point that's earlier than they should move forward, that's a risk decision.
Enter
I love
Chief
Alyssa
Legal
Miller's
Officer, and they're typing of
true.
special words on documents.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
This also goes back to a conversation we've had many times that as much as I love the frameworks, my default approach on security is what can we do in a pragmatic way? Let's do some pragmatic security first. Before we go look at a framework, do you have MFA on? Are you backing stuff up, right? Let's talk about the really low-hanging fruit. And I think in this case with Copilot, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Do we have sensitivity labels set up and some basic training? Yes, great. All right,
we have sharing controls put in place. Yeah, of what people can share externally or internally. Do we have? Yeah.
Have we gone and found some of the PII and made sure it's in the right spots and put some rights management on it? Can we spend a small project to say we're going to go take care of the biggest risks? We don't have to define your policy today. We can go clean up your risks and then work on a policy. Do some of this as roadmap items. And I think that's always a win to take it, break it down into pragmatic steps, do a few of those, and then build a roadmap to really raise the maturity over time.
Well, and Henry nailed something too that's a comment that said, and how many SMBs are actually going to periodically review their data and classification? I think this is where technology steps in. I genuinely believe, and Nathan, you're privy to a lot of these conversations, that there are people backfilling those gaps in technology right now to start being able to define things, right? You look back at the way people have approached CUI and FCI and those types of things that come into play. They come up with patterns, they come up with tagging methodologies, they come up with locations, they start getting those done. And I think that's where I think technology is going to rise up in this, is that you'll start seeing auto-discovery of new links being made, or new creations that are out of norm, or behaviors that are being deviated, or content that's been discovered. And that goes to question 26, which really says, do you use labels to identify based on the content of a document, not somewhere I put a bucket label on, but because Nathan typed in Matt's social security number is 123. Yeah, y'all write it down. It's accurate. I promise. 4, 5. Anyways, but do you have things that are looking for that in that current basis? And Microsoft goes to say, yes, we're using Purview, which is obviously what they're pushing for. It's for auto labeling, which you don't get until you spend another $20, $30 a license, right, compared to Business Premium. We're using a third party. But the point is, I think this should drive revenue for saying, to Henry Tim's point, we can't just decide this on the point. And also to Huey's point of saying, hey, we got to continue with business. Yeah, then let's make this crap be in line and do this as we go and make it easier for people to do this. Like, we always make a mountain out of these problems, but really, technology is what solves these problems as well, ultimately down the road, right? Like, so yeah, anyways, 26.
Well, remember, this is brand new. It hasn't been a week yet. I reached out to a vendor, not one of ours today, and they were still trying to get up on their feet because this news has just completely blown them over, and they're having to pivot their entire business plan.
I've had 2 meetings like that today. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they're trying to catch up with these things. So it'll take a little time, but I think we'll see solutions come out.
If we're lucky, Microsoft lets us leverage the power of Copilot to do this someday too. Of like, hey,
yeah,
you have the language model thing to go do this for me. Can I? Let's build some parameters in. Help me. Give me some recommendations.
Yeah.
Show me. And
100%.
I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe you start seeing a group of sensitive questions that are part of that logic monitor, right? Like when you start seeing that, you could see, long tangent, but I do agree with you there. And I think there's also a call to action, in my opinion. And, this is a very Microsoft-friendly show, but I will also say there is a secure by default and secure by design mantra from CISA that really comes into this. And you do see, if I can give any critical aspect, is you do see an exposure to a market segment because they want it so badly, overweighing some of the challenges and gaps that are here. If we've looked through these questions, we've answered none of them with "this is already in place." There's nothing that has been everything is done. And I think there needs to be a hero SKU for AI for small to mid-sized business that's an addition for AI governance for small to mid-sized business that can be done at a tenant level that can manage those things and make this easier for those small to mid-sized businesses, right? That's my take on this in my mind, Nathan.
All
right, 2 more. We got 2 more because we know these are solved too, and this is probably actually true already. Do your users leverage file versioning features in OneDrive, or are they saving a version as a different file with a different file name? And boy, my brain starts to spinning on why that question gets injected here and starts to give some real context onto what the risk is of doing it now.
War wounds to the office when they made this spreadsheet, man.
Oh man.
Yes, they did.
Every tenant's got file versions, and that version of the file you wrote where you really cussed out that customer, that coworker, and then you erased it the next day and rewrote it. That's now in Copilot too. This is going to be.
I've never done that myself, Nathan, so I don't know how I feel about that statement, but yeah, 100%.
Yeah, man, it's right here in version 1.6. What are you talking about? You wrote it.
Yep.
You clearly. Yeah, I have some fear on that just in general of what is that versioning being there. And I think that really comes into, we'll come use our E5 Purview license and set parameters on it. You're selling me something I can't protect myself with. And I feel like there's some gaps there that need to be solved, whether it's done by third-party solutions, which is what I'm seeing play out right now, or whether Microsoft says, maybe I can sell you another $5 license and we can solve this, or maybe we can move this into the premium SKU, or maybe we can, whatever those things are. It doesn't have to be the full feature set, right? It can just be enough to get us through this challenge.
Enough.
This is one of those things that's a great requisite question. And then the last one, which is, does your organization have tools in place to manage the flow and storage of company apps and data on personal devices? And you're getting into that side of it too, right? Of egression. Yeah. What about that? Let's talk the BYOD to wrap this thing up. We're just going to knock it out in 2 minutes and be done, or?
Well, you're working from your home computer. You download a file, your personal version of Copilot, then indexes it. Like, this is a snowball here. This is amazing. So, this has been a hot topic for a long time of can we start really dialing in, trusted devices and, that sort of thing on MDM and Intune and that journey to modern. Again, Copilot's driving maturity here, which is great.
100%
and the customers that are already on this journey are going to be ahead of the curve.
And I know a company. We know them well, and they got punched in the face real hard because of one person's untrusted device. So it's high time to have this conversation with your customers about BYOD, even on the mobile device level. Are you controlling that with mobile application management and really understand the risks that you introduce? And my hot take of the day will be BYOD workstations are unacceptable. That's my That's my opinion on
that. Without secure browser methodology starting to play out that we're starting to see in the market, I agree 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it brings into that point of why would you think about MAM? What is the risk there? Can I copy and paste? Can I save to my phone? Can I copy can I bring files in? Like, those are the things that are part of this of, well, are we securing that side of it? And I will say to Microsoft and the parties that are behind it, Nathan, I think you're familiar with a lot of the people in the SMB team that have been working on this, but they really did bring up basically 12 topics that I think will set the tone for this year around governance, data information, the understanding of the lifeblood of what is security. And I think it's a good thing. So many people get it, what is security wrong, in my opinion, right? Security is beeps and boops and nerdy things and the things exploding. No, security is where's my data, how much is it worth, and what are the adequate controls I've put in place to meet the sensitivity of said data. That's it. And this is a good thing for us to see people have to go through that process and be put in a way they can understand it by simply searching. I bet can you imagine the type of demos we're going to see with this? Let me show you how I can search for how much do you spend on your wife's home budget as an owner. Like, can you imagine the kind of stuff you could surface that you just don't even think about that's in that small to mid-sized business blending of home and business and access and just all of those things. So, yeah, this is a good conversation. Cough as Microsoft overhauls M365 license packaging. All right, I think we beat this to death. Let's drop back into our regular view and wrap up. Nathan, are there anything else you want to add to this, or anything you haven't said around this? How do you get your customers ready for AI, or have we pretty well beat it to death?
I think we've hit a lot of it. I mean, I look at it as a great opportunity for us to lead with our customers, kind of help them mature, get a lot of wins across the board. And I, like I said, start with pragmatic, move on to detailed, and get the wins from this product, not only from the productivity improvements, but allow it to drive that cybersecurity maturity. It's going to be a win for everybody. I'm excited to go down this road.
And thank you, Nathan, for being here with us. Dom, we'll go to wrap up here, but I want to tell anybody that's out there as an MSP and going, I'm overwhelmed. I heard it in my security class today. There's just too much. How do I go through this? How am I going to get through this? You felt the same damn way when you converted to MSP. You felt the same way when you started RMM. You felt the same way when you said, no, Nathan, please put your ticket notes in. Hey, little Matt, can you please get to your time entries within 4 hours after finishing the ticket? I really need this information. We've all been through this. This is no different. It's just another mountain to climb. It's just the next step in your evolution. And so don't approach this with fear and trepidation. Approach this with the decision to continue moving forward, right? And the decision to win, in my opinion. So it's my thoughts on it, y'all. Dom, wrap us up. Nathan, I love you. I appreciate you jumping in and having this
Nathan,
hard conversation.
thanks for joining us. Thanks to the crew for letting Nathan use the Pax8 HQ studio. It's a fun place to shoot a show from. And that's our show for the week. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for interacting with the chat. Don't forget to join us next Friday at the same time. We're going to be talking about CompTIA Trustmark, which we've only talked about, I don't know, once or twice before on the show. So join us with Chris Johnson and Wayne Selk from CompTIA next week live, Friday, 2 p.m. on the game.